Next up is Jenny Jones, who I've known for a number of years. She's a Scottish architect, educated in the UK, USA, and France. She now runs her own studio, and hopefully we'll see some of her work in her delivery, where she's recognized for her sensitive approach, marrying rigorous contextual and cultural analysis with a consideration of the sensorial impact of the work. So Jenny worked for OMA, Richard Rogers, and I'm rambling on too much, but now over to you, Jenny.
Hi, thank you, David, thanks. So I'm going to talk about the identity of the workplace, but actually in more detail, the kind of identity crisis of the workplace. A beautiful crisis, but a crisis nonetheless. Okay, so David was starting to touch on that, but my background is, well, actually right now I have my own practice, but I also am a visiting lecturer at the Royal College of Art. And I have worked for a lot of different practices, and I brought this in because it's very much about this sector mentality. I don't have it. I've worked across sectors, across scales, across boundaries, all over the place. And that overlap is what interests me. And I think that with the entrepreneur, that's what's interesting. It's always about the overlap. The overlap creates the innovation. And workplace is in that moment right now. It feels like there's this crossover that's happening. Today, I'm going to pretty much focus more on the interior and the choreography and casting of that. And the way that we program the interior for these new ways of working. I use these icons here because I think that the external representative forms of the office, the church, the home, and so on, are now being challenged programmatically, internally, and also in an adaptive way. So somehow the sector identity has become an inspiration, not a boundary. Creativity can't be timed, and it can't be programmed. The Millennium entrepreneur recognizes that you can't say that the next unicorn is going to happen at Tuesday, 9:05, off the assembly line. And this kind of overlap of time and space is seen in the way that somehow any spatial redundancy is seized upon and monetized. So here there's a new startup in New York that's you can co-work in a restaurant that would normally have been empty during the day. So somehow this thing of this maximization is going on, but it's also about how we are when we're in those spaces. So on one hand, we have this sensorial thing going on, we have the mindfulness discussion, but on the other hand, we're not really here at all. We're absent, or we're in social media, and how does that affect the way that we are in spaces? To all of this, I suppose, we carry these backstories. So when Stanley Kubrick cast these two in Eyes Wide Shut, we all knew they were married, and we brought that backstory to where we were with it. And the reason I bring this up is it's a kind of complex casting of the design elements that we use and the references that we carry with us about what they represent. So when Ace Hotel opened on 29th Street in 2009, they were creating for their, as they call the creative classes, this new idea of working. And it became this hotbed for startups. And now, it was so unexpected, but now we expect it. We expect to be in hospitality, identifiable areas to carry out our work. This notion of what makes us creative, what can spark the next unicorn, means that we start having these sort of elements that we don't expect to have in office environments, something that we don't identify with the office. Design elements creating a kind of behavior, the way that we identify with a space. When we worked on the Prada project, we did this Bleacher Astarotte, and at that point, that was about display overlapping with event, overlapping with a customer journey. But now we see that this is used as an element for anywhere that says we're informal, we have people to speak, we like new ideas, and we don't have to work at our desks all day. But somehow there's a kind of nostalgia going on, as I say, this sort of representation of the past and the future. And when we saw Don Draper in his office having a nap on a sofa in the afternoon, it's like, I really want to do that. And you know, I think that we're at this point now where, and this happens with co-working as well as with, you know, corporations, with everyone, where we know that open plan is amazing for some things, but it's not great for everything. So we recognize that there are tensions. There are tensions going on, and somehow we could talk about this as being a duality. So we want to be in Old President's Men typing pool with that story and be collaborative. We also want to be sort of having that kind of privacy. So these dualities, these tensions can create this fantastic, like, complex and contradictory landscape for anything. And I think it's a really interesting way to look at how you can kind of calibrate for anything. We use this as a way of setting up a brief, so that, in a sense, what it then creates is a brief for an identifiable environment that reflects the values of a company that we're working for, and that then creates a sort of internal placemaking. Super fast case study on a London tech office, which is really successful, but it's stuck within its walls. It can't move out because of a lease situation. And we realized that a third of their workers didn't need a hot desk. What they wanted was somewhere to just touch down. So like the images that were shown earlier, we created this type of landscape space. This is actually not finished, so we can't show you, but of how a sort of Venn space where activities could overlap in time, and that surfaces could be allowed for standing, day beds, and so on. The things that are happening in workplaces all over time. But then the next thing I wanted to show you is not about a laptop. It's more about, oh, sorry, this one. This is actually a zoom out. So this is saying that by taking those DNA dualities, you then end up creating sort of company-specific filters. So you have 5 filters that then create 12 zones that then have identifiable behaviors because of the design environment. The next thing I want to talk about, I feel like I'm going so fast, is about beyond the laptop. So this was a meanwhile use for a Victorian space. Could there be a way of providing art space, studio space for these type of people, and that would not make a loss for the owner? So what we did was we zoomed out and we looked at the year rather than the day and night. And we said that actually give over the space for part of the year to commercial use, and that subsidizes the rest of the year for non-profit making and affordable working space. This may go ahead, we hope. And that sort of way of thinking then led us to look at ideas of what you're talking about industrial space, and how that kind of nude space, as the Dutch call it, is super useful for this way of this flex of this internal programming that can be adapted and readapted. So actually, could that be something that could happen, which when we were putting this talk together, we realized is actually, the former Victorian industrial spaces. So the last slide is actually a place called Room 108, which is the kind of original co-working space, which is the New York Public Library. You go down these monolithic corridors that are sort of internal and external, and you get there are 3 tables, 12 chairs per table, and when you go in there, the middle table, people are drawing and sketching and doing mathematical equations, and there are no laptops. And then you realize it's because there are no PowerPoints. And I think that was just like so maybe accidental, who knows? But it was perfect because it just changed the way that you could be in that space. So thank you very much.